guys, it's Mark Zickery, Mr. Politics, also known as Mark Zickery of Space Command and Mr. Sci-Fi. And this is going to be a little bit of a ungainly talk because I'm just trying to get my thoughts together and talk about a whole bunch of things and try and center in on one thing because it's very challenging. And but let's talk about it. It's a momentous day. The House is voting on impeachment. Last week, the Capitol was stormed and people were killed. And this is not business as usual by any means. But I want to try and get a handle on all this. And it's a very challenging thing. But let me take a run at it, okay? So my friend O.D. Dillon sent me a link to a 2-hour long talk by some of the people that he believes and he listens to. And it was a very interesting journey because it was really like passing through a mirror into a distorted alternate reality. And here's the problem I have right now. I believe what I believe, and I know that my friends on the right believe what they believe. And so how do you convince somebody what's real? Odie is trying to convince me what's real based on the things he's watching and the things he's listening to, and I don't doubt at all his sincerity. And I'm trying to convince people who may not agree with me, because obviously if I'm just talking to people who do agree with me, what's the point? And so it's a very challenging question. So let me take a run at this, because I think that all of us are reacting to what we perceive as injustice. And I think that's laudable, and I think it's human nature, and I think that's how justice prevails, by speaking out and acting against injustice. Now, this is not, of course, speaking to people who are on the extreme right and who are racists and Nazis and, all that stuff. I mean, that's a whole different can of worms that we may touch on, but that's not who I'm talking to. I mean, if you favor me and my relatives being put in gas chambers and then cremated by the millions, we really don't have a lot of common ground, I don't think. So, but that being said, let's talk about the unthinkable, because I think a lot of what's been going on falls into that category. Now, I remember when the Twin Towers were hit, and part of what made that so astonishing and so deplorable and so appalling was that it was previously unthinkable. Planes flying into buildings as acts of terror, that was something you would see in disaster movies. That wasn't something that happened to America. And so reaching the Capitol, seeing people screaming to hang the vice president, wanting to kill members of the House and the Senate, basically tearing our Capitol apart, all of that, that's the stuff of movies. That's not something that happens in reality. It's unthinkable because we're a democracy, and we've been raised ever since we were children that the democracy is what keeps us safe. Democracy is what keeps us free, and democracy is what keeps us with a government that cares about what we think. And I can go into all the twists and turns, but I don't want to do that. I just want to talk about, and by the way, with the Twin Towers and the siege on Washington on Wednesday, there were reliable intelligence reports that these things would happen, and for various reasons, these warnings were not heeded. But see, I don't think Wednesday is a standalone event. I think just with 9/11, where other acts of terror were planned, I think that we are in the middle of this action. Sunday is coming up. They're talking about armed protests. I don't think an armed protest is a protest. I think an armed protest is an insurrection, frankly. And you may believe in the Second Amendment and your right to bring Uzis to protests, but I am not of that mindset, frankly. But again, that's another discussion. But let's talk about all of these things, because I think that what's being missed in all the chatter and all the I'm right, you're wrong discussions is a core question. And I've been really chewing on this. It's a very difficult question. And the question is, how do I know what's real? It's that simple. Because in my opinion, the people who are standing up for the Stop the Steal movement are being lied to, consciously lied to. And the people who are standing up for a legitimate election that occurred are acting upon the facts, the real facts. And it gets down to, what is a fact? Pontius Pilate said to Jesus, what is truth? And it's still a very interesting question, and it has not lost any of its meaning in all of these years. But there's opinion and there's truth. So anytime you're saying, well, rumor has it, or everyone believes, and that's not a fact. That's not a fact. And what is a fact? So here we go. How do you know what something is a fact? Because we're all getting our information from these screens, and what our friends believe. And just because everyone in your town is for Trump or everyone in your town is for Biden, that doesn't make who wins real, okay? So how do you know what reality is when you can't possibly go digging to the base, to the bottom of everything? I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion. I interviewed people who made the Twilight Zone. I know that what those people told me was the real deal, or at least from their point of view. But I can't go spending 5 years of my life digging into who won the election. So I have to believe someone, okay? I have to believe someone. But what is a fact? So let's talk about this, because I'm going to try and really dig into this. And again, please, my friends on the right, please stick with me. And again, I'm open to differences of opinion, but if we don't agree on what facts are, then we can never possibly agree. And that's where we have to get into the weeds a little bit and see, and with a machete, and try and get to clear ground, which is not to incite riot. And the guy who brought the pitchfork to the protest, well, I'm not going to comment on that either. So, how do we know what's a fact? So now there's a physicist named Schrodinger, and there's a very famous thought experiment called Schrodinger's cat. And the question is, there's a cat in a box, and there's a poison that can be triggered. And if it's triggered, the cat will die, but if it's not triggered, the cat will live. And it's set on this inconstant determinant of whether or not it's going to happen. And his point is that until you open the box, the cat is both alive and dead. It is our act of viewing it that makes it so. And with all respect to Mr. Schrodinger, in this case, it's bullshit. I don't believe it for a minute. The cat is either alive or dead in our world, in the real world. And so let's say for a moment that someone outside my place was dressed in a certain color. And let's say I looked at them and that color was blue, and then I go into some people who have not seen this person and I say that person's dressed in blue. And let's say another person, knowingly were dressed in blue, said they were dressed in red. Now the people who believe me will believe that person's dressed in blue, and the people who believe the person who say they're dressed in red will believe that they're dressed in red. But in reality, they're dressed in blue. And the person who's telling them that that person's dressed in red is lying. And so who's to blame? The people who believe the person who says they're dressed in red, or the person who lies to them about that fact? I believe that the person who lies to them is to blame. And that's, I think, what's going on here. I believe to my heart that Joe Biden won the election, and we have all lived through many, many elections in our lives, and there's never been a case where thousands and thousands, if not millions of people have risen up to say the vote was stolen, the vote was corrupt. And why is that? Because the leader never before said that. Gore didn't say that. All these other people, the Democrats, the Republicans previously who lost elections, conceded. But now Trump is saying the election was rigged. And what he's really saying is if he doesn't win, the election then is rigged, because only elections where he wins are valid. He said that in 2016, guys. Go back and check the tape. And he's saying it now. But my friends on the right will say, well, I can prove chapter and verse that these things are true. So let me go through some of this stuff. I think, okay, let's just boil it down, okay? Let's boil it down. Let's see if we can get to something that we can agree on, or even if my friends on the right start saying, well, maybe I have to look at this more closely. Maybe I have to think about this a little more thoroughly, okay? Here we go. We're talking about what's unthinkable. I remember, again, the joy of a long life is remembering when things were different than they are now. I remember when the staunchest foes of Russia were Republicans. And the idea that a Republican presidential candidate would go on television prior to an election and say, Russia, if you're watching this, I want you to break into the Democrats' email and make it public, to solicit the aid of a foreign government And the next day, they broke into the DNC and they sent all that stuff to WikiLeaks, and that stuff was public. It isn't whether or not the emails deserve to be public. That's not the issue. The issue is soliciting a foreign government to interfere in our election. Republicans from 30, 40 years ago would have said that was impossible. That would never, ever, ever happen. And so that's a starting point. By my lights, President Trump should not have been allowed to be president just based on that. And every day of his presidency, I think you could say that there's something he's done that's impeachable, whether it's the emoluments clause, many of the things. From by my lights, any president who says press is the enemy of the people should not be president. That alone should be impeachable, because that is when we begin the long spiral into totalitarianism. Because if there's only one person whose opinion matters, and he's always right, and he never apologizes or takes responsibility, that's not democracy, and that doesn't allow us the life that we want, the world that we want. Okay, so let's take it further down the road. Okay, just walking down this road. When he said the press is the enemy of the people, even if you say, well, yeah, that's right, CNN is the enemy, all the other, even now Fox News is the enemy. Okay. Leslie Stahl interviewed him at the beginning of his presidency on 60 Minutes, and he mentioned that the press is the enemy of the people. And after the interview, off camera, she said, now, Donald, you really shouldn't be saying that stuff. Come on, what's the deal with that? And he said, the reason I'm saying fake news is so that when the press comes after me, when I do something wrong, I can say that they're just lying. That's how I can fight back. And he said that overtly to Leslie Stahl. Now, you may believe that Leslie Stahl is lying, but I don't believe that. I think she's telling the truth. I think that the people who are lying know they're lying and are doing it anyway. I think Stop the Steal was a campaign of falsehood. And so, but let's walk down this, because I made a ton of notes just to try and bring this all together. But because, again, the people who are yelling, the people who are angry, none of them, by my lights, unless they're acting with due malice or unless they're deliberately wanting to kill people, if as I said in the previous commentary, if I believed that the vote was rigged, that the real winner of the presidency was not the one taking office, I would be angry too. I would be, fighting. If I believed all the judges and all the politicians were in the pocket of a crime, of criminal activity, I would be storming the Capitol too. But you really have to see where there's commonality. Okay? Injustice. If you believe that fighting injustice is our obligation as Americans, then you have to look at where injustice lies. So here we go. The Black Lives Matter protests that got millions of people out on the streets were about injustice. We all saw George Floyd murdered by the cops, okay? Black people are saying something very, very simple. They're saying, we want to be treated as other Americans. We want to be able to vote, and we want the police to treat us the same as they treat white people. They want justice. And by my lights, unless you're a racist, those are not inappropriate requests. They are guaranteed equal rights. Equal rights is what they should get. There was a country and a time when Jews were not allowed equal rights in Germany. That could happen anywhere, anytime. And so, okay. So they were just saying, we want justice. The people, for the most part, who are protesting what they have been told is a stolen election want justice. Now, who's being lied to? Well, we all saw George Floyd murdered on film, on tape. Live cameras, we all saw that. So I don't think I don't think those people are being lied to. Police are killing people. They're shooting people in the back. They're stopping people for traffic stops who have no weapons, who end up dead, okay? It's not a coincidence, okay? So, and let's look at Trump. Is Trump a liar? Has he lied previously? Just go back. He said COVID's a hoax. Do you believe it's a hoax? If it's a hoax, then why is he trumpeting Project Warp Speed and talking about how fast he got the vaccine to the public? They can't both be true. Either COVID is a hoax and false, or this whole vaccine thing is pointless. All right? Now, if you've had friends and family who've sickened and died, then you know it's not a hoax. Okay? But who benefits from the lie? Who benefits from saying something is a lie? You have to look at that. Who are Trump's friends? Who does he like? Putin? President of China? Kim Jong-un? Who doesn't he like? Angela Merkel? People like that. People who are overseeing democracies? Justin Trudeau? These are not people that are his pals. He likes autocrats. One thing he said that is true is he once said, "I never joke." And I absolutely believe that. When he said he wanted to be president for life, that's true. Okay? And all these things he says are true. Okay. And you might say, well, yeah, but he's saying he wants peace. He doesn't want violence. Yeah. Okay, sure, fine. But again, look at what his people are saying. Look at what Rudy Giuliani and his kids are saying. Those were, they're speaking his will. Okay, that is his will. But okay, let's continue. So what is this all about? In my opinion, I have to put this down for a moment to read something from a book. Because black people have been disenfranchised, their vote has been taken away. Okay, I think Stacey Abrams is a hero. Okay, so this is a book, and the author writes an introduction. He talks about the first book he wrote, and this is the second book. And in this, he says, his first book, The Leopard's Spots, was the statement in historical outline of the conditions from the enfranchisement of the Negro to his disenfranchisement. Okay? So, and who is this author? His name is Thomas Dixon Jr., and his second book is, you can see it, The Klansman, okay, which was made into Birth of a Nation. This book is from 1915. And he is saying that the enfranchisement of the black people was a terrible, terrible crime, and the disenfranchisement was a triumph. Okay? So what are we talking about? Black people are the ones who won for Biden. They're the ones who won for the the votes, the Senate votes in Georgia, and now we're saying, okay, do we want to disenfranchise black people? Is that what we're fighting for? What is the world that we want ahead? Okay, let's just walk it down for a minute or two, because again, I think this is very, very important. Let's say for a moment that the election was stolen. How can you prove that? How can you prove the election was stolen? Have you noticed that people who should be saying the election was stolen aren't? Okay, so now Republican judges, Trump-appointed judges, the Trump-appointed Supreme Court, Republican secretaries of state, Republican governors, they're saying that it wasn't stolen. Okay? The list of people saying it wasn't stolen grows and grows and grows. And the people who are saying it was become smaller and smaller and smaller. Mitch McConnell, now in favor of impeachment. Okay? Not overtly, but that's what he's saying behind the scenes. Okay? Why? Because people are storming the Capitol and it's not over. Armed insurrection is being fomented. Okay, so what world do we want? Do we want a world where we vote, and if our guy doesn't win, the government continues as a democracy? Or do we want a world where one guy gets to say what happens? People were shouting, "Hang Mike Pence." They wanted to kill. There were hangman's nooses set up outside the Capitol. Is that the America we want? Here's the America I want. I want where everyone's vote matters, where everyone's vote is counted. I want where everyone has equal rights. And if you don't believe in that, the First Amendment protects you in that. But I think people who overtly lie and know they're lying should be held accountable. And that includes Fox News, that includes everyone with Stop the Steal who knew they were wrong, knew they were lying, and said it anyway, did it anyway. Really check. If you want to know what the truth is, read the transcript of the court hearings with Giuliani, where the judge says to him, "Are you claiming fraud?" And he says no, because he could have been disbarred if he said a lie in court. That's when he was telling the truth. And he knows he's telling the truth in that moment, and he knows he's lying in all these other moments. Okay? Please look at this stuff. What America do I want? Everyone has equal rights. Everyone has equal power. Okay? I'd like where people have medical care. I'd like where people are protected by the police. Now also, I think that the Republicans in recent decades have had much better messaging. Stop the steal. And I'm sure they researched it to see which was the most catchy phrase. Stop the steal is a very catchy phrase. It's very simple. It's very easy to understand. Defund the police is an extremely bad phrase, okay? Because it makes people think what they want is not have any police. Defund the police. It sounds like, oh, no police, so the criminals can run riots, so people can come into your house, and do whatever they want. It's the purge, but all the time. No. What they're simply saying is, if someone's having a mental breakdown, you don't send guys with guns, you send trained psychological professionals, trained psychologists. If someone is stopped for a traffic stop, they don't get killed because of that. You set up systems where if someone is murdered by the cops, those police are held accountable. Anytime an unarmed person is shot to death, that needs to be treated seriously, okay? I'm very pro-police. I love the West Hollywood cops who got my stolen car back, okay? But I don't want to be afraid of the men with guns. I don't want to be afraid, if I'm not doing anything wrong, that they're going to harm me, okay? So think of injustice as what we're fighting. But in order to fight injustice, you have to know what justice is and what truth is. Having our senators, having our congressmen, having our vice president in fear of their lives when they are exercising the Constitution, when they are exercising the rule of law, when they are exercising our democracy, that mustn't happen. It must not happen, okay? The Army is there to protect us. The cops are there to protect us, all right? So, what else can I say? Who are Trump's enemies now? Mary Trump, his niece. I trust her word. She grew up with him, she knows him, and she's a trained psychologist. If you haven't been listening to Mary Trump, I would strongly suggest you do that. Who's his enemy now? Mitch McConnell's his enemy. Mike Pence is his enemy. Okay? My God, good Lord. These people were his friends until they said, Biden's the president. Why would they say that? Why would they say that when all they have to do is lock arms and follow Trump's edicts? Why? Because they know that the moment they disagree with him, if he were in total control, if he had total power, they would be in prison or executed. He wants to execute his enemies. He said so, okay? So, he's pardoning his family. He's pardoning his friends. He's pardoning people who stood up for him in breaking the law. And I know you can say he hasn't pardoned his family yet. Okay, let's see what happens. But his friends, the number of his friends in power are shrinking, and there's a reason, because he stands against democracy. He stands against the rule of law. He's not a president like we've ever had before. And I lived through Nixon. I lived through all of these other Republicans, sitting here. I'm not in prison. I'm not dead, but that's because we live in a democratic system. Okay, so let's see. Anything else? Anything I haven't covered? I know it's been a bit of a rambling talk, but what I'm trying to do is try and say, think about who. If you're only listening to one person and the people who believe him, you've got a problem. I was listening to someone in the House talking about when Lincoln said we all have to heal the wounds of the nation. That's after we'd won the Civil War, not before. And study history, 1876 or 77, whenever that thing was done, where all of a sudden the Army was taken out of the South and Jim Crow started up, and black people were suddenly, there were hundreds of thousands of registered black voters, and then it went down to almost nothing. And for the better part of the 20th century, black people could not vote. And this is not the America I want. And I'm sorry, if it's the America you want, Well, I don't know what to say about that. I pray that you don't win, because this is a country of immigrants. And there was a time when Irish were hated. Was a time when the Chinese were much more hated than they are now. I mean, the Chinese Americans, it's like this is a country of people who came from elsewhere because they wanted a better life. And I love democracy. I love this country. And, I love people who disagree with me. But in this case, if you are siding with the men with guns to take away the votes of people who don't agree with you, you're a traitor. I mean, that's all I can say. And I don't mean Odie, and I don't mean all my friends on the right. I mean, if you want some people to have their votes heard and other people not, you gotta really look into your soul and think about what you're advocating. Because I want everyone, left, right, and center, to have their vote matter, but not have anyone's vote matter than anyone else's. Okay, that's my little 2 cents. Anyway, I've gone on for a long time now, and I hope you've gotten something out of this weird talk of mine. But I'm just trying to bring everything I can think to bring to this discussion. It's there's a new wave coming. There's a new future coming, and for me, it's a future that's inclusive. I love the fact that women are getting more places in the government. I love the fact that people who are a different color than me are getting more places in the government. I think AOC is great. She's one of my heroes. I loved Ruth Bader Ginsburg, John Lewis, all of these people who stood for everyone being heard, everyone having their voice and their vote matter. So that's it for now, Mr. Politics. Subscribe to me if you want to hear more of what I'm saying, whether or not you agree with it. And subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi. And thanks, guys, for being here. God bless America, and God bless every one of us. Bye.